Edward and Apollo Stark. Discuss Apollo's new book, Stitch.
Apollo, how are you?
I'm good, David. And how are you today?
I'm very good today. Now, for me, it's the afternoon. For you, I think it's a little later, isn't it?
It most certainly is. It's an evening over here in the UK.
Wow. And that's the greatness of technology, right? We're on not quite opposite sides of the world, but we're certainly not neighbors, but we're able to talk in real time and record it in a podcast like this. I think that's cool. I appreciate very much, by the way, you taking the time to do this and to be on my podcast.
And I appreciate the invitation. That's
sure. Now and you and I, we've talked a little bit, but I'm looking at the picture behind you, and it looks to me like that is a book that you've written.
It is. It's my debut novel, and it's called Stitch. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about a little bit today, amongst other things.
So do I understand that Stitch was almost written as a challenge?
That's correct. Yes. Somebody said to me one day, I bet you couldn't write a novel about knitting. And it seemed a quite bizarre thing for me to be asked to do. And I thought, I'm sure I can if I give it some thought. And initially I thought, well, knitting needles, they have to be magic wands. So the element of fantasy magic had to be incorporated into the story.
Wow. It's wildly creative. I mean, so why don't you just give us, a quick summary? What is Stitch about?
Stitch is about an ancient pair of magic knitting needles that were created by a sorceress in order to save her people from a great famine. After she'd used them to create the crops that they required, she found that she couldn't destroy the needles and that they could potentially be used for great evil. Her brother, who coveted the needles, decided that he was going to kill the maker of them and steal the needles for himself for his own gains. But Zamna, the creator of them, foresaw the possibility of this happening. So she knitted herself an immortal black cat to be the guardian of the needles, who would ensure that they fell into the right hands and never fell into the wrong hands.
It's wildly inventive. How long did it take you from the time someone suggested this silly topic to coming up with such an intriguing and engaging story?
The synopsis, I probably had the guts of the synopsis written within about a month.
Okay.
I didn't actually start writing the story until I'd put to paper an idea of where it might be going.
Yeah, it's a wildly inventive story, and the title is very clever, because as soon as you see what the story is about, that one word almost tells the whole tale. So walk us through. There was a morning where you weren't writing a book, and then there was the next morning where that was the day you had done the synopsis, you had an outline, you had the idea, and you were gonna start the process. What did that look like?
The actual process was I needed to think about characters who I wanted to be in the novel. How were they going to interact with one another? So I started by once having drawn up the brief synopsis, which was the outline for the story, I started to develop character profiles. So basically I was writing things like the name of the character, height, color, hair, likes, dislikes. I didn't over embellish the characters, because as I started to write the stories, I wanted them to naturally develop, like as people in their own right.
Sure. Sure. That's fascinating. And so how did you outline the entire story first, or did you just have an idea and then you just started writing? There's two styles. There's outliners, and then there's kind of people that start with the stuff you have, then they just kind of write the story and discover it as it goes along.
I wrote an outline so that there was a start, middle, and an end. But how I was going to get from the start to the middle and from the middle to the end, I left open to give me lots of room to play with the idea.
Sure. How long did it take for the kind of the first draft to get all the way from the front to the back of the thing?
First draft in real time, if I was sitting down writing 8 hours a day, it probably would have taken me 4 months. But in real time, because I was only writing part-time, it took me a year.
Okay. And I don't know. I have tried to write all day. I don't know about you, but I can't write for 8 hours. For me, if I write for 8 hours over, 4 days, 2 hours a day, my stuff's pretty good. If I try and sit down in one day and write for 8 hours straight, pretty quickly it becomes flat for me. I don't know. Did you write over the course of a year because you had other stuff to do, or is that just kind of how
other projects? Yeah, I had other projects that I had on the go as well. I've been doing other children's picture books, so they were taking up some of my time as well. And I also work in the landscaping industry, so it's pretty full on work schedule, really.
Yeah, and you mentioned Stitch is your first published novel, but it's not your first book. You have eight or 10 illustrated children's books, right, out there?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a lot of work, I would imagine, and you have to work with folks that do the art and all of that.
Yes. I've got several artists that I work with that are very good at what they do. I do all the compiling. I actually do the storyboard, so I give them the initial concepts of what images I want on each page, but then I allow them to, produce them in their style.
Yeah. What was the transition like from doing those types of story books? I don't know what to call them. Picture books. What do you call them? Is that I don't know what the picture books?
Yeah, picture books.
Books. What was the transition like from writing the picture book to writing an actual novel where it was just you?
It wasn't too difficult because I have actually written several other novels. I just haven't published them.
Got it.
They're still sat in a box, a dusty box on top of my wardrobe, waiting desperately to be rewritten. But I was in the process of actually rewriting one of them when I was throwing this challenge down, and I got so engrossed in the concept of the story once I started to think about it that I thought, now this is a tale that I really do want to tell. So hence it being my debut novel, other than one of the others that are still in the dusty box.
So was there ever a point in the year that you were working on it that you got stuck, or you couldn't get back to it, or you started to get nervous or feel like maybe you wouldn't finish and you had to kind of push yourself, or did it just flow out? Or what was that year like when you were writing it?
It was pretty good. I think that because I wasn't sat down 8 hours a day, it gave me time to reflect upon what I'd written to a greater degree. So I was able to consider what I'd written and develop it even further. Even if I'd been sat down 8 hours constantly, it may have been a lot more forced.
Yeah. I think forced. That's the word I was looking for earlier. Now, would you go back and reread kind of what you had done and refine it as you went, or was it getting the whole thing out in a draft and then going back and revising it, or how did that work? Since, because a year, that's a long time to be working on one story to keep it consistent in your head.
It is, yeah. Well, every time that I went back to work on the book, I always read back at least half a chapter of what I've written, and refresh my memory with my synopsis, which as I work, I constantly update the synopsis. So as there's the timeline develops so as I can see what's going on in a timeline. So if I need to look back and how far back did X occur, I can go back to that point quite easily and find that point.
Yeah, no, that's very organized. Now, did you write on a computer, or did you write freehand, or how did you do it?
I type on the computer, but so when I am actually working, yes, it's on the computer. But in the times in between, when I'm doing other things, I always have a notebook to hand, and I'm constantly scribbling notes. And sometimes I find that when I take my notes back to the computer to continue working, I find that some of the things that I've written in my notes I've already done. And it's like, oh
yeah,
and there was me thinking that was a great idea, and the great idea is already there.
Wow. So now, and when did the book come out?
The book came out a year ago now.
A year ago. And then how long between when you finished writing it and it actually came out?
That was a year in total. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then now, do you miss it? Do you miss the process of going back into that world and working on the story?
Or
are you just glad to be done? Yeah.
Well, I'm working on the sequel.
Okay. All right. So you went right back into. Did he take a break, or did he just jump right back in, or what?
No, straight back in.
Okay.
But I intend the story to actually be a trilogy. As I've been writing and the ideas have been coming, I've developed a second synopsis, and I'm in the process of a third synopsis. Even though I'm probably about 10,000 words away from finishing the second story now.
Oh, wow. That's pretty good. I mean, that's significantly into it.
Yeah.
Look, I'm the same way. When I finish one of my books, especially a book in a series, I always tell my wife, I'm taking a break. I'm not going to write for a month. I got to refresh. And after about a week, I just gotta start, because I start, just like you said, I start getting the ideas, and I want to get back into that world, because there's something, it's impossible for me to explain.
It's that unscratchable itch, isn't it?
Yeah. And I heard Stephen King. I watched all these videos before I decided to make these, and he had some interview I saw, and someone said, well, how do you pick what your next book's going to be about? And he said, I pick a place I want to go spend some time. And I thought to myself, that is just the stupidest thing I ever heard. What the hell is he talking about? And now that I've done it, I'm on the other side of that. It's not quite an addiction, but it's an itch. Like you said, it's just an itch. And you just want to go back into that world and see what happens next and work it all out.
That's it. It's a form of escapism in itself. It's as much as I enjoy reading and escaping into other people's ideas of worlds, there are those in my own head that are unraveling all the time. Look, I need to get on paper.
Yeah, I do it. I'll be sitting here, and in some of my books, I write thrillers, so some exciting things happen, and I'll go through something, big, exciting, scene and everything, and I'm like jazzed, and I'm like absorbed by it, and then I go back, I go back over to the house. And like, nothing's happened. So I think, I want to tell people this, and that's it, but nothing's happened. I sat in a room for 2 hours. It's a weird feeling, but
it's an indescribable buzz, isn't it? It's that sort of like euphoric that you've created something that's original and hopefully engaging.
Hopefully, well, it's at least engaging to me or you, right, the writer. And okay, so to that point, when a person reads Stitch and they get done with it, kind of what's the feeling they're going to have, or what what's their experience of having read it? What is there anything you were going for there?
I want to open them up to the possibility of understanding genetics, really. That's because Stitch itself is laying the ground for a much bigger story.
Well, because I looked and shoot, I don't have it up. You categorize this book as like genetic engineering fiction or something like that. Is that?
Yeah, it's
something like that.
Science fiction, fantasy, a magical fantasy, because it's quite an unusual blend of genres. Really, there is even an element of horror to the story.
Right. Yeah. Now I got to ask you. We didn't talk about this before, but are you a cat person? Are those cat eyes on the cover?
Yeah. They're supposed to be the demonic eyes of the creature that is knitted. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Look, I'm a cat person, so I didn't know. I just
I am a cat person as well.
Maybe subconsciously that's how you landed on those. That's great.
Quite possibly. Yeah.
All right. So have you been surprised about the reception of the book in any way? Has anyone said anything, positive or negative, that you weren't expecting?
Well, so far, everything's been pretty positive with response to the story. I've only had one critic said they were unhappy that they felt that it ended rather abruptly.
Yeah, I get that. Whatever.
But then that's why there's going to be a sequel.
Exactly. Today's world, so few times you just write one book and nothing's just one anymore. Everything's a sequel. So, right. It didn't end abruptly. It set you up wanting more for the next one, which is what they say you're supposed to do.
Yeah. See, it opens up a bigger can of worms, most definitely.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, okay. So Apollo, let's say that, there's someone watching this, and because we're so engaging and interesting, they've made it this far. And maybe they're thinking about writing a book themselves. They have an idea in their head. Would you have any advice, for anyone who is kind of in that, and maybe this is their first book, or maybe they've written some other things, but they haven't published them, or they're just looking to refine their process? Do you have any suggestions that you would want to offer?
Ideally, if they're thinking about writing a novel, I would say go with what you know. Tell the story that you want to tell. Oh crikey! Go with what you know. I think is the main thing, or what really inspires you, something that grabs your attention, that you really enjoy. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. I think go with what you know is important. I talk to a lot of people now. I've talked to a lot of people who've written books, and I think the better books come where the person writing it has some sense of, I use the word authority. It's not the right word, but there's some sense of legitimacy to what they're explaining, even though we're talking about it's fiction, but they bring something to the table, either a passion, I'm just repeating what you said, really, either a passion for the topic, or they have some experience with the topic, or they have something really interesting to say,
if they have a passion for the topic, then and they intend to write about a specific thing, then ideally research is paramount as well. You don't need to throw in huge amounts of research into the story, but just light smatterings to sort of like give it some authenticity. Always seems like a good idea to me.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. All right. Well, look, Apollo, it's been great talking to you. I appreciate that technology allows us to have this kind of conversation, even though we're not necessarily direct neighbors.
No.
Well, tell you what, let me know when your next book comes out, and we'll talk about that book, and maybe we can talk about if there's anything that's changed in your writing process, or anything you learned as you start to work into a series where you have established characters and established ideas that are now kind of in stone. The first book is easy because you can go back and change something, but now you got to build on it, and you can't contradict what you've done before, and it's got to kind of all make sense. So I'll be curious to see if you pick up on anything while you're writing that directly relates to that.
Right. Okay.
All right, sir. Yep. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a joy talking to you.
And thank you. It's lovely meeting you and talking to you too.
Great. Okay. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. Please consider hitting the subscribe button.